I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard NOC Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color. You see me? The Hard NOC Life. Comics, movies, and TV. Yeah.
Happy WonderCon. Oh, by the way, this is Hard NOC Life. I'm Keith.
Hi, I'm Dominic. Yeah.
How was WonderCon?
Oh, WonderCon was really good. I mean, let's see, I haven't been in, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And, for those who don't know, it's a smaller sister version of San Diego Comic-Con, which is like huge and overwhelming, as you know, Keith. And WonderCon is sort of just a compact version of that right next to Disneyland in Anaheim.
Yeah, slightly less overwhelming than
slightly less overwhelming. It has sort of more of a central point, it's literally got a fountain in front of the main hotel where everyone gathers, and that's really pretty. Other crazy thing was it rained. There was a big storm that hit Southern California,
but Tony told me it never rains in Southern California.
Tony was exaggerating for artistic effect there, because it sure rained. And for me, I don't think I've ever gone to a Comic-Con type event where it was like raining. So that was really
because it doesn't rain in maybe they were singing about San Diego, because maybe it doesn't rain in San Diego is the thing.
I mean, everyone's in freaking big costumes with like delicate like pieces, and we always assume in San Diego like it's just always the problem is gonna be too hot.
Well, but New York Comic-Con is always in the fall or winter, so I guess there's
right. But that one I've never been to.
You've never been to New York?
No, I mean I've never been to New York Comic-Con. I'm hoping to go this year. Yeah.
Because I know you've been to New York Toy Fair, because you covered that for the Nerds of Color several years ago.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, and that was nicely indoors and all that shit. So WonderCon was my impression was it was interesting because I think both WonderCon and San Diego they like the gentrification wave of the big studios has passed them, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like you remember at one point San Diego blew up because it was like all the major studios were there and announcing things, creating huge traffic and crowds with all their street teams. And within the last few years, as you know, they've gotten D23 and other things. So they built their own cons. So they kind of moved out of that. So we're left in its wake. And it's interesting because in a good way, true fans are still there just doing what they do. And there have never been like huge announcements or like events at WonderCon, but there's definitely like, okay, we're not missing anything. There's no big trailer dropping at this moment.
For movies, I will say, like, as a toy collector, there were some really cool toy announcements at WonderCon this year, because I think Hasbro, Mattel, and McFarlane Toys had big presences apparently at WonderCon, because there was a lot of things they revealed.
Yeah, that was their version of a big panel, and I missed it. So what?
One of the cool things for me, and we'll talk about it later, because I wanted to talk to you about Ghostbusters since we didn't talk about it last week.
Right.
But they revealed that Hasbro is producing G.I. Joe, like old school G.I. Joe sized Ghostbusters figures.
Oh, for real?
In scale Ecto-1.
What is that, like the 3 3/4
3 3/4, right?
Yeah,
3 3/4 Ghostbusters figures. That was really
oh, that's
cool.
rad. So they could fit into a van.
So they can actually fit into the Ecto, because like they've been doing the 6-inch scale, which is my preferred collectible size.
Mm-hmm.
But a 6-inch scaled Ecto-1 would be just. I mean, I have a few scaled Batmobiles, and they've taken up my entire office. That's why, like, G.I. Joe, as much as I love the G.I. Joe classified line, one of the appeals of G.I. Joe is the vehicles. That's why they were always 3 3/4, because you could have a shit ton of vehicles like that they would fit in. And when you have a 6-inch G.I. Joe, the 6-inch scale tanks and planes are just way too massive to really fill up your basement with,
That's true, yeah. No, I mean,
can you imagine the flag in 6-inch scale? It would be the size of my house.
Yeah. Oh my God. Right. Have they ever tried to make that? That would be way too
Not
much.
yet. I mean, they've only just started doing vehicles for G.I. Joe. So like, I backed the HasLab, which is their crowdfunded toy of his tank.
Yeah.
And it's massive, and it's sitting in my closet. It's too fucking big to open. I can't even open it. And they just like crowdfunded the Dragonfly, which was the helicopter. And it's just
gotcha.
like, dude, it's just too much. I have
Yeah.
the Jeep sitting in a box. It's just too much. I can't open it. I have nowhere to
Yeah.
put it. I need to stop buying them.
Yeah, the original, and it is the original. 3 3/4 is the original, right? We
Right.
can call that Prime, whatever.
Right, like
I
Star Wars vintage and GI Joe. Those were all 3 3/4 inch
Yeah,
figures.
I grew up with those, and I like those toys, and yeah, so I got you. A Ghostbusters on that scale would be great.
Mhm.
So they said they announced that. Is that like
Yeah.
a specialty? You got a funded thing, or they're
No,
like
no, no. I don't think so. I
different?
think it's a mainline release, and I mean it was just like I think computer renders that were revealed and I think they had like model print like displayed, but not like for mass consumption. It was just kind of
Oh,
like
okay.
the one of a kind model of the figures, but I don't quite know when they're coming out. But I'll talk more about Ghostbusters in a
Yeah,
minute. I
yeah,
want
yeah.
to hear more
No,
about
so that
WonderCon
happened. Yeah.
because I
So
know one of the main things you want to do in WonderCon is this is your first post 12 Valentines WonderCon, and I think you had an audience with Gail Simone a little bit, right?
yeah, so for 12 Valentines, this music project we're doing, it's like a superhero concept album. So we just released our first song officially, which is on Bandcamp. And when I say released, it's not on Spotify yet. It will be imminently. We're doing that thing where we're slow rolling out all the streamers. You can get it on Bandcamp and buy it like you used to do. Not
Right.
in physical media. But anyway, the point is it's out there. And it's based on her comic book Secret Six. And so like we wanted to go meet Gail Simone because she did have a big panel and she had several signings. So me and my friend Jessica, Jessica also goes by Dr. They YYY on Instagram. She's a cosplay nut. So she dressed up as Harley Quinn and Harley Quinn red dress from the Suicide Squad James Gunn movie. And we went and got and I wanted to get my actual Secret Six trade paperback signed. So we went on Saturday. There was a significant line because Gail Simone's a big deal in the comics, signing sector. And yeah, so we met her and she's a delightful person. Gail Simone is a great human being. She's very busy during a Comic-Con, and I found out that her husband is like co-doing some of her tweeting, like informational tweeting. Well,
So did you check to make sure she was the
excited.
one who responded to your tweet about the song, or was it her husband?
Wait, that is an open question. Um, I believe that she's cool with the song, and
Did it not come up in conversation?
well, that was the thing. We don't want to like have a no, it did come up in conversation. We didn't want to like assault her with that at the moment because again, this is in the middle of WonderCon. There's 20 nerds behind you trying to get their shit signed. And they
For
don't give
sure.
a shit that you have an indie song, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It's that classic thing of like the networker guy versus the true fan guy who just wants
Right,
their
right,
shit
right.
signed. So, and
You
I'm
didn't show up with your portfolio of like, hey, can you look at my
right.
art?
Do you want to meet me for cocktails at and do you know blah blah blah? Meanwhile, someone's behind me going, I've got this Batgirl, and all I want is you to write Gail Simone on it. So we try to be respectful of all those things, because again, it's a con. 100 things are happening at once, as you know. But yeah, we had a nice brief interaction. Um met husband and Gail Simone and they were delightful, and we took several pictures, which you're going to see on various Instagrams. And I hope it'll stay on her feed so all Gail Simone fans can find the song. And also, and just this sort of just add a destination point to that. We understand that Secret Six is kind of an obscure comic as they go. I mean, like, it's Suicide Squad adjacent, but you don't like know a lot about Secret Six.
I mean, yeah, I'm aware of them, and I know Bane was part of it at one point. I think Animal Man was in it at one point.
Yeah,
So
maybe. Yeah, so
and
even
it's got a rotating cast. There's not like six Secret Six to like, Well, I guess
yes.
there is an iconic Secret Six. I don't know who the fuck they are, but like, it's been different people have made up the Secret Six over you.
Yeah, because like Suicide Squad, some of them die, and they're always obscure. My only point is, so the one of the actual big Gail Simone announcements was she's going to start writing Uncanny X-Men for Marvel,
Mhm.
Marvel Prime, and that was kind of a big deal. she's going to start writing it in July. As part of, the next arc of X-Men comics following this rather gigantic Jonathan Hickman phase that has been going on forever, which I don't know if you've been following or not.
I mean, Hickman's kind of rewritten the entire Marvel universe because of Secret Wars and Fantastic Four for like probably the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, totally.
The Marvel we know today is like a result of everything Hickman's done.
Yeah, absolutely. He's retconned the retcons, and he's like, reshaped the whole thing. All that said, Gail Simone's writing Uncanny X-Men for Marvel Comics proper starting this summer. And we also have an X-Men related song. So we're going to be starting recording that, and that'll be part of the whole thing. And maybe all of them will be done by July, God willing, crowdfunding willing. So all that to say, it was
crowdfunding is God. Sorry.
Right. It's like God whenever some crowdfunding comes in. It's like, did you hear my prayer, people? Oh, look, here's some money to cover the studio time. Amazing. Anyway, blah blah blah. So all that stuff will align. So we've got a song out about Secret Six. We're gonna have a song related to Suicide Squad stuff and Harley Quinn stuff, and eventually we'll have an X-Men song. And these, actually, by pure coincidence, mirror some of the things that Gail Simone is creatively doing this year. So it's a great coincidence.
Corporate synergy at its best, even though no corporations were involved.
That's the best kind of synergy, when it just happens like
organic.
Because X-Men stuff is just hot right now because of X-Men 97, everything. They've gotten a big bump.
I mean, it's X-Men 97, it's Deadpool, Wolverine. Like
right.
it is very much an X-Men year in 2024.
Yeah, totally. And it also comes with all those things. I don't know, like we were talking about, the different generational imprints things. And like, I kind of want to talk this related to X-Men and Suicide Squad. People are going, oh, that's my X-Men. Oh, that's so. I feel a lot of love for this X-Men 97. People are going, oh, that's so my X-Men. But there's also the complaining and discourse about, oh, but they changed this a little bit, and right. So all that stuff is in the mix, right?
And then that's the thing, is like that's true about literally everything. Like any reboot, any sequel, any reimagining, there's always going to be something. That's the thing about adaptation, right? Because like X-Men 97, and one thing that confused me when the project was announced was that 97, it's called X-Men 97 because the show ended in 97. It was like 5 seasons. It was actually X-Men, like it started in 92. And so it's called X-Men 97 because it's picking up. It's kind of like how, in the comics they've done Superman 78 and Batman 89 to kind of like
right,
stories of the movies and things. And so like I just naturally thought, okay, X-Men 97. Wait, I was in college when that came out. So it was definitely, I was past it. But then I recalled like, well, actually I remember watching it in high school because it had been around 5 years previous to 90. So it just took me a while to wrap my head around the fact that like, yeah, I was part of that. I guess I'm an elder millennial, late Gen X. So that's kind of like, but it wasn't my thing.
I think we're in the bubble.
We're in the bubble. X-Men though was never my thing regardless, right? Like we've talked about, I was more of a DC guy. Like in 1992, if you were going to tell me to watch an animated superhero series, I was going to be Batman, not X-Men. But I'd watched it. But it wasn't formative to me the way it's been for so many people. And full disclosure, I haven't watched a single episode of X-Men 97.
You watched a single episode of X-Men 97?
Yeah, not one. I haven't even like logged into Disney Plus in months.
Well, that's an interesting thing you say. Yeah, because it hasn't got that thing you really got to see, right? They're having sort of content scheduling. They're in a a valley. I don't know. My point being, X-Men 97 is their big push.
Right. That's the big thing
season.
Right now. Yeah, for sure.
And then I guess the Star Wars series, which I think looks pretty good. But yeah, I did have a point related to that, to the Batman Suicide Squads. Also, I just want to say quickly, so I like that year thing. Maybe the marking things with a year is sort of the new, like adding a the or not having a the when they're titling the things that they've had 6 titles of before.
And particularly like if they want to scratch those nostalgia itches, right?
Right.
Just, because again, 1989 very much related to Batman. 1978 very much related to Superman. Like the thing is, like, what other things have like the iconic year related to? Because my whole point about 97 was that 97 was not the year I associated with X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while to realize they called it 97 because it's picking up in 1997 when the show ended. So like in actuality, the Batman comics that are continuing the Michael Keaton story should not have been called Batman 89. They should have called it Batman 92 because that's when the Keaton Batman story really ended and Batman Returns.
Okay. Wait, let's just try to do a little memory exercise like old farts for my benefit. Batman the Animated Series is happening at the same time as the X-Men animated
Yes, they
series?
both debuted in 1992.
Okay. So they had about the same time frame to imprint on people.
Yeah. And then Batman had the I guess fortune of kind of being part of a larger animated universe because the Superman animated series from Bruce Timm and Paul Dini was in the same universe, and that kind of branched into Batman Beyond and Justice League. So like there was like a whole universe of series all really, and they were like precursors to like the CW Arrowverse in a way.
Right.
You had multiple TV series all existing within the same general universe. And I think, you could even like included Static Shock in its tendrils, just like Batman Beyond. Like it was kind of like this massive universe. Whereas X-Men, I don't think X-Men ever crossed over with like Spider-Man or
I don't
the
believe
other
they did,
Marvel series at the time,
Well, I mean, to the point, they seem to have closed off in 97. And if I'm not wrong, the DC stuff is sort of crosses over the Y2K.
Yeah, right.
They sort of
Justice
flow
League
into Justice League and Batman Beyond.
Yeah,
and
they're all part of the same.
Yeah, and they had a few
animation.
movies like Mask of the Phantasm.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the only thing confusing about the DC animated universe is that I think those letters DCAU mean different things to different people. Because when I hear DCAU, I think of like the Bruce Timm Paul Dini universe. But I think DCAU also refers to like the series of animated films that are all interconnected that DC put out, like originally on DVD, but then like they just put it all out on HBO Max after a while, right? Like when people stop buying physical media.
Yeah.
But like there's that like series of, I guess, and they're all like adaptations of comic series, like Throne of Atlantis and Superman Shazam or whatever. So
but it's funny when you're looking again, maybe we've talked about this before, but when you're looking at the Max library, the DC hub, like it flattens time. So it's like all these animated movies at once,
Yeah.
You can't know without researching like, oh, this was 20 years ago and this was like 3 years ago.
Right. And the thing is, like, it's all like listed alphabetically. So if you wanted to watch the animated films in order, I don't even know how you would go about doing that without referencing like IMDb or
you'd have to like make your own. Yeah, you'd have to put effort to like make your
at
own
least
playlist.
Disney Plus tells you like different chronologies you can watch the Marvel movies in,
Right. That's the functionality they have, which is nice. Well, at some point I wanted to open up the other can of worms about Batman, but was there anything else you wanted to?
Well, no, I wanted, WonderCon, like this is your first convention in a while, right? In person.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just kind of pick your brain about what that's like. But before we do, I did want to like circle back a little bit because you had mentioned how like conventions over like these big deal conventions, the ones in California, have evolved and kind of devolved and evolved again. What was your first San Diego? What year did you go to San Diego the first time?
Oh, well, I went once as a little kid that I barely remember because my cousin Steve took me. My cousin Steve helped me get into all this stuff. And it was much smaller deal then. As an adult, I can't remember. I mean,
You've been to so many.
In the mid 2000, in the mid aughts.
Okay.
I don't know. At one point I was going like, 6 or 7, 8 years in a row.
Right. Well, the reason I asked is because like I my first one was 09.
09, okay.
And you mentioned, so I'm guessing yours is probably like 06, 07, 08.
Maybe something like that.
09. But because like even in 09 to me, it was already a big deal, but it did not become what it was post like MCU and stuff like that, right? That's when Comic-Con and Hall H and all that shit just kind of like blew up. I think 09 was that like cusp because what I remember from 09 was people making a stink about Twilight taking over Hall H.
Oh, right. I remember that. I remember that. Yeah.
And almost like those, and this is like, around the time when like toxic fandom and stuff started really bubbling up and things. But that's what I recall about 09 and like the push for Hollywood into it. But the reason I bring it up though is that like I think that the years previous to like Dark Knight and Iron Man, like that was the before times
Sure.
when it comes to like, I mean, there was still a presence and was still, comic book nerds wanted to go to Comic-Con. I don't know, it was a destination. I think once, particularly the MCU tour, when like Iron Man made its debut there and they announced the Avengers there, right?
Yeah.
That's when I think everyone realized Hall H was like the golden ticket.
Yeah.
And they kind of rode that for a few years until, to your point, probably the pandemic. And even before the pandemic, D23 and, the studios having their own things to announce rather than having to rely on Comic-Con, which is interesting too. And I think it also diluted the fact that like there were so many conventions across this country and that San Diego didn't like trademark the word Comic-Con because like every city has its own Comic-Con and it's not the same corporation, it's not the same entity of like the San Diego International Comic-Con. So I thought that was interesting too. Like a lot of people, oh, I'm going to Comic-Con, and they mean like, Des Moines Comic-Con.
Right. But I think that's good. That's to me, in my old school way, that's as it should be. Every town should have their own Comic-Con, like every town should have their own like local hip hop style. It's every town has a flavor. And yeah, I don't want to get too much into how the people put on WonderCon in San Diego, how much they're a nonprofit or what kind of organizational thing they have. That's too much a can of worms that I don't even care about. But the point is, we are at a new phase. What you just described, I could see it on the ground, and I saw it as a good thing because it's fans still doing what they love to do, which is dress up and admire each other's costumes. And there's slightly less urgency of, oh, is the Marvel drop happening right now? We kept checking. Is it happening right now? And we're like, oh no, we're just going to sit here and admire each other's costumes.
Well, and I think like to your point about like pre-Hollywood, the Comic-Cons, WonderCon, San Diego existed particularly for like the comic book publishers to announce their big events, not the movie.
Yeah.
So like, totally. Final Crisis was announced at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Whatever the Clone Saga maybe was announced at a Comic-Con, right? It wasn't the movies and the TV shows and the actors and the celebrities. It was the biggest celebrity at a Comic-Con before was like, Neil Adams and Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb, right? Announcing Superman for All Seasons. It wasn't Jeff Loeb announcing, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's the biggest difference.
Yep, the times we've lived through. But anyway, again,
it's going back to that. It's going back to like the big comic book, like to your point, Gail Simone being announced to write X-Men was one of the bigger announcements that came out of WonderCon.
Absolutely.
Or like Hasbro's doing G.I. Joe sized Ghostbusters figures was like one of the biggest news coming out of, at least in my like.
Yeah,
world.
no, it was the biggest news, and that's good.
And it wasn't like, these are the stars of Thunderbolts or whatever.
Right. I mean, the closest thing to that was all the X-Men voice actors were there and they had a panel. Mm-hmm. I didn't go to it, but they were all there. And Jessica Mitt, the lady who plays voice acts Rogue, who is the same lady 30 years later, same voice. And that's kind of precious. That's great.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I wanted to get your take on a couple things since we didn't get to chat last week. Last week, if you were here listening, spoke to Dave Boyle, our mutual friend. So Dave says hi. Thank you for
that was good. It seemed like a fun chat.
It was really good. And I always wanted to talk to him. So like that was, we mentioned on the podcast how we've kind of circled each other's universes for a long time. So it was nice to finally connect. But what I wanted to ask you about was, I'm assuming you haven't had a chance to watch Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
No, I haven't. There were a zillion Ghostbusters in cosplay at WonderCon. I'll tell you that right now. But please go on.
Well, but so Ghostbusters, had debuted in the #1 movie last weekend. It tanked this weekend. It dropped like 65% because Godzilla X Kong came out this week, which is a dumb title. Both of them share the subtitle something Empire, which is
not Dawn of Kaiju. Okay.
Well, that's the thing, right? For a while, everything had the word rise in it, right? It rises. It was Rise of the Guardians, the Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Now everything's got Empire in it. It's Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Godzilla, Kong, the Frozen Empire. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so what we missed, not podcasting last week, was all the discourse around Ghostbusters. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about it is I don't know how big a Ghostbusters guy you are, like writ large. I'm sure like the original movie had some import to you.
Yeah, I'm with that.
Gen X person. But what I find interesting about the Ghostbusters as a like media property, as a cultural phenomenon, is that this essentially just like an 80s comedy became a cultural touch point at a very pivotal year. And I feel like it was one of the harbingers of like the times to come. Because the discourse around the female Ghostbusters of 2016 was like a preview of like what our politics would look like, what social media would look like, what the internet would look like, what fan discourse would look like. And I just want to take you back 8 years to 2016, because you and I didn't podcast at the time, but like ask you, like, what do you recall about the Kristen Wiig, Leslie Jones, Kate McKinnon Ghostbusters discourse? Not even the movie. The movie, whatever the movie was, is what it was. But do you remember the discourse around that movie back in 2016?
I recall I was going to review it for Yum Yum F at the time, so I went to see it, and I liked it pretty much, liked it okay. And the discourse, I got the sense that people hated it, and I got the sense it was because, when I say people, I mean trolls, hate this recasting and having more women thing. I didn't see it as discourse, so that's all I remember. It's just people yelling about, oh, it's women, and I don't know. Fuck that.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, that's the thing. It's like in the moment, it's kind of like, oh yeah, what are you getting mad about? But it's like, that's what I mean, that it was like a preview, because then every movie after that, because I feel like, I mean, there was always discourse around whatever pop culture. I mean, the whole purpose, the Nerds of Color had been around for 3 years at that point. So like we were very much engaged in like having these kinds of discourse around film.
Yeah.
But I feel like 2016, I mean, this is coming off of like things like Gamergate, and which was another like kind of harbinger of like the 2016 to me was the watershed year because of the election. I think had Donald Trump not won that year, maybe the way the internet devolved over the last 8 might have gone differently. Yeah. But that was a turning point, I think.
They are parallel.
You know, our mutual friend Sean Taylor talks a lot about how fandoms has influenced politics and vice versa. But I just think like it's interesting because like it's a time again we're watching a Ghostbusters movie where Ghostbusters is in the cultural firmament, and it's another election year, and it just reminded me of like, why couldn't, because essentially it was a reboot. Movie franchises get rebooted all the time with like different interpretations. Like, what if we did an all black Honeymooners? Remember that?
Right.
With Cedric the Entertainer.
Vaguely, but yes.
But like it was just like, oh, let's do a Ghostbusters, let's gender swap it. Like it wasn't that big a deal, but it became this like, you know, the dawn of like the angry YouTube thumbnails.
Yeah.
And it really came to a head the following year with The Last Jedi. I feel like it was like
totally
Ghostbusters 16 and then Last Jedi, and it was like, okay, fandom and internet movie discourse will forever be tribal and polarized. That's just how it is.
Well, I mean,
trolls on one side and normal people on the other.
Yeah, the first thing I say is that's why we pay attention to pop culture, because it reflects and parallels these big deal political things that are actually happening. They are not disconnected. When people got complained about all lady Ghostbusters or about Captain Marvel, it's exactly parallels the Trumpism, the MAGAism, the political shift of the stupid Republicans towards being just like misogynist and racist and all the things they're totally comfortable being. Yeah. Why is that? And why is it so it's a space where you can look at what's happening in microcosm. But I want to add, I mean, the simple point is, yes, people hating on Captain Marvel relates to people, the Republicans war against women. Basically, I
mean, the playbook is the same. The discourse around the Marvels last year, it was a copy and paste of like Ghostbusters. And again, the thing about it too is that like it completely erases the ability to have any kind of like critical commentary about like narrative or plot or characterization. Because even if like you didn't like Ghostbusters 2016 for various reasons, or the Marvels for various reasons, or even The Last Jedi for various like story reasons, you almost had to draw lines and say, any criticism is couched in this,
Yeah.
and any defense is couched in that, and it's like you can and it also I also feel like it was a de-evolution of like just movie criticism or film criticism, because I think things like Twitter and the internet made it so like anyone can be a movie critic, and then people like it just destroyed media literacy, I feel like, because a lot of people were no longer able to critically engage with pop culture anymore.
Yeah, no, it did. And I do want to say something that's sort of counter to that, that's a little optimistic though. Because again, here we have nuance here. We're not just flattening everything. My nuanced thing I would add is, one of the first times I got into this kind of kerfuffle was over Ghost in the Shell, the Scarlett Johansson movie. And I wrote something like, this Ghost in the Shell, it is kind of racist. And it got around, and ended up in one of the alt-right groups talking about it. So, but the nuanced point I would like to add is what I realized from all these, guys screaming about it's not racist, it's meant to be a white lady, or whatever their argument is. And the key point is they love Ghost in the Shell too. We can't forget that. The reason we're arguing about this sort of is they love Ghostbusters too. I mean, they love the old Ghostbusters. So we're alike on that point. Does that make sense?
Wait, you meant they love Ghostbusters, comma, TOO.
Yeah,
they love Ghostbusters numeral 2, because that's me. I'm the only one who loves Ghostbusters.
You're the only one who does that. Right. Everyone who loves Ghostbusters agrees the first one is best and the second one sucks, except for you. You're the outlier on that. Great.
Yes.
And I realized I just did two IPs that start with Ghost, make it even more confusing.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's great. It's called a segue.
My sum point is we have to remember that the reason people are screaming about it is because we all, at some point, we and the trolls all loved the same thing. We loved the original Ghost in the Shell. We loved the original Ghostbusters, and they just have an extremist. You can take an extremist point like, oh shit, they changed it, and now I hate everything. Or you could take the point like, oh well, maybe I'll intake this change and be interested in it. But it does it's not like, well, I mean, sorry, sometimes that's true. And sometimes it's just trolls leaping onto a thing that they don't know about.
Yeah.
And both those things too. But sometimes it's true that you love the same thing and you just have completely extremist different reactions to when it changes.
Well, and I think that's a great distinction, because I think the idea of like toxic fandom can get lumped into like what you were saying, like trolls and misogynists and whatever. Because like all fandoms are toxic to some degree, right? Because,
sure.
The whole point of being a fan is being fanatic, and you can't have people who are on opposite sides of one thing and go at each other on. And I think the internet just amplifies that, right? Because I think, again, coming from two Gen Xers, like it used to be, and I don't know if you had the same experience, but like when we were, we were just talking about watching X-Men in high school. When we were in high school, or even younger, middle school, elementary, like when you were into like nerdy things, finding someone else who also liked nerdy things was like finding your community. Like you like Batman too, or like the fact that like it was odd for finding three other people who also liked Star Wars. Where we now live in a world of aplenty, where like like who doesn't know what Star Wars is in 2024, right? Like that was so. I mean, that was what like made Kevin Smith films to me as a high schooler so revelatory. It was like, wow, there are other people in the world who talk about this shit like this. And then discovering like Wizard magazine, like it's what put me on this path, honestly, right? Like, because I wrote for Wizard, and I engaged in Kevin Smith films, and I think there was a period, and you and I have talked about this, where we were also as toxic as those fans on the internet now. Like when, let's say, Phantom Menace came out, which is about to celebrate its 25th anniversary. 25 years ago, you and I had a YouTube channel in 1999, might have had the angry, I mean, it was a popular refrain. People may not remember. It was a popular refrain back in the late 90s. George Lucas raped my childhood, which has like so many like negative. Yeah. You don't want to phrase things like that nowadays, but like, that's what so many people said. It was.
I was thinking about that exact one, and it was such a thing that South Park like made that a joke in one of their episodes, right? Yeah, a terrible South Park joke, like where he physically like rapes the childhood or something, a gross South Park thing. I was thinking about that exact thing the other day because, again, it's all the timing. Like they made that joke, but it became something else. Like now the question is, when you make jokes like that, are you saying in the South Park way, God damn it, Phantom Menace isn't as good as Empire Strikes Back? Or are you saying, God damn it, Last Jedi isn't good, and the reason why is because women and black people.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's a distinction. Like,
Yeah.
are you complaining, or are you complaining and blaming it on women, black people, the Asian
Well,
shit?
and then
It must
just
be their fault, you know?
and to extend your analogy a little bit further, what was interesting, like one of the reasons I remembered hating Phantom Menace so much when I was 22 years old was the opposite. Like, wow, this movie's super racist.
Right. Right. It's okay to complain that George Lucas, because we're directing at George Lucas. It's his fault. You know what I
You're
mean?
actually being racist.
Right. It
With
was
the
actually
Nemoidians
racist, and it's okay
and
to
Jar Jar
complain, to say,
Watto.
George Lucas, you fucked that up. But now what people do, to get back to the Ghostbusters, like now they say like, oh, the casting of women is the thing that fucked it up, and it's not.
Well, speaking of Ghostbusters, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I will
Wait,
say
you didn't even tell me what happens in this Ghostbusters. Are you
yeah,
going to? Okay,
we'll
great.
talk about it. So like I saw Frozen Empire a couple weeks ago now, and it's talking about the discourse. It was not reviewed very like well. Like a lot of it probably got mixed to negative reviews. Our own site gave it a pretty bad review, saying it was like not worth the price of admission, basically. And I don't know if it's just because I'm a sucker for Ghostbusters. Like again, take it for the grain of salt. I liked the second movie as well.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought Frozen Empire was delightful. I had a lot of fun watching it, and I thought it was a great kind of legacy sequel. And I liked Afterlife. I don't know if you saw Afterlife, which was the original like Paul Rudd reboot sequel version of the film. I like that one enough, but actually like this one more than that one. And I don't know, again, if it's just because I'm a sucker for anything Ghostbusters, or if I'm just contrarian when it comes to this universe because I like the ones that nobody else does.
Well, there's that. I mean, does this one have like an angle? It's not like we're all recasting them as women, or it's like a family-oriented thing, right?
Right.
Or...
So the Afterlife, which came out in 2021, was the true legacy sequel to the original two. Because like, so one of the things, and I can see where people, had an issue with 2016, was that it was a complete like reimagining. Again, because this was coming from a period in time when that's what you did. You took an IP and then you just reimagined it. It's like One Day at a Time on Netflix, or pick any property, and from like the 70s or 80s, like the Fall Guy that's coming out this fall,
right.
summer, with Ryan Gosling. It's not a sequel to the Lee Majors TV show.
Right.
It's a reimagining of that property. That's what they did. They were like, what if we had a story where we took 4 regular people and turned them into ghost exterminators? Because that's how Ghostbusters wasn't this like lore heavy mythology. It was just like Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis going, hey, let's come up with some wacky idea to cast John Belushi and Eddie Murphy in, because that's who was supposed to be in Ghostbusters originally, and have fun. And then Dan Aykroyd just had a history with like supernatural shit. So we kind of put all this import on that franchise that never existed.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. Just really quickly, it's a self-contained story. Yeah, they just made it up. In many ways, that's what's remarkable about a self-contained weird fantasy idea. The whole movie is everything you need.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. You didn't need a sequel, and I get that. But
right.
I mean, come on. Bobby Brown's On Our Own is just the perfect soundtrack.
Justified the whole thing. Yeah.
Justified the whole thing, having that song. Like that's the way I look at the world. Had we not made Ghostbusters 2, I would have no karaoke song to sing.
And that's enough. Everyone needs a karaoke song.
So anyways, 2021,
20 years later, right?
2021, they decided to make a film that would follow what happened, 30 years after the events of the last Ghostbusters movie. And so the film in 21 took place, and that one actually took place in Oklahoma, because it was, again, they've now in the 40 years since Ghostbusters have created all this mythology around it.
Right.
and the first film in this new series took place, and it turns out like we were following the family of Egon, who was Harold Ramis's character, and they basically discovered that their grandfather was a Ghostbuster, and all this stuff takes place in Oklahoma. It stars Carrie Coon and McKenna Grace as the granddaughter, Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things as the grandson, and they all like decide to become Ghostbusters at the end of the film because I don't want to get too much into the plot. Basically, there's all this like negative supernatural energy in Oklahoma that they have to like destroy.
My only question is it slimy? Is there slime?
Oh, of course. There's it's not Slimer, but it's definitely slime related. Gozer the Gozerian comes back in the last movie.
Excellent. As long as there's an homage to slime.
Yeah. Well, Slimer's actually in this one. There's a great Slimer scene in this one. And so I mean, one of the knocks against Afterlife was that it was very much like Force Awakens. It was like, remember berries? Like, hey, remember this? Hey, remember that? Like they brought back Gozer the Gozerian. They brought back the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. They brought back the dogs that possessed, Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis. They brought all that stuff back, but what I like, so that was that movie, and then it turns out the biggest reveal is that Ernie Hudson's character, Winston Zeddemore, became this like super rich benefactor, and he's been funding Ghostbusters for the last 40 years, like secretly. Okay. And I think it was either an after credit sequence or the end of the film where he was like, "You guys want to move into the firehouse or whatever." And so this movie takes place. The family now lives in New York, and they live in the firehouse, and they are now Ghostbusters, just like Egon was, and they're taking phone calls and they're going and busting ghosts, and it's great. And one other thing that's like kind of like related to all this, and part of like I think what speaks to so many people's like love of the franchise is that, again, that same time period we were talking about X-Men and Batman the Animated Series, there was another, I mean, 10 years before those films or those cartoons, there was a very, very influential cartoon on me, and it was called The Real Ghostbusters, which came out in, I think, 87, 88. And it was an animated version of the Ghostbusters. Not in continuity. So, like, again, this whole thing about, like, the continuity of Ghostbusters, it told its own kind of, like, silly thing, and it had great toys. Right. I think I have a couple vintage ones over here in my closet. Wow. And that one was just like, every episode was a ghost of the week they would capture and have like shenanigans. And what I like about this new movie, long story short, is that it, to me at least, gave off vibes of like the Real Ghostbusters cartoon. Now you had all these different ghosts with different personalities and different gimmicks and things like that. So that, I think it was a good movie, and more people should watch it. And that's all I have to say about that.
Excellent. And now we can play with the toys cross universe with our G.I. Joe toys. And I think that's an awesome.
That's very cool.
Cobra of the week or whatever monster of the week you want to. I'd love that. Okay, great. So I've intaked a little bit more about the recent Ghostbuster movies I know. And again, I'll say at WonderCon, big cosplay presence, tons of Ghostbusters.
And that's the thing. Ghostbusters as a cosplay concept is like kind of great.
Yeah.
It's a great look. And, as a kid, I always wanted to have a proton pack and a neutrino wand and all that stuff, right? So
yeah, got your proton pack on your back. And you're strapped.
Yeah, fine about Vigo, the master of evil.
Yeah.
Boys is not legal.
Well, I'm not sure what the segue is, but I'll mention something about, okay, we're talking about all these things, nostalgia and imprinting. So another thing that was on my mind that came out just a couple days ago was the new season of the video game Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, meaning an expansion, a DLC, a new content drop, that whatever you want to call it. I currently cannot play it because I'm on the road and my PS5 is at home. But I have been, following this game, and I still stand by. I love the game, and their first content drop involves the Joker. They're adding Joker as a playable character, and
even though he's dead in the universe, right?
He's dead in the universe. So, and I haven't played it yet, so I don't know why he comes back. I'm sure it's weird, but
There's multiversal reasons, I'm sure, that he's still around.
Oh yeah, there's any number of reasons. It's not like it doesn't make sense to me. But the point is, as an interesting move because, as we know, the Suicide Squad the game has been getting a lot of hate because oh no,
queer. Similar to what we were talking about with the Ghostbusters and everything else. A lot of the hate is like it somehow is woke.
Yep. And I'll just bet a penny that some of the people who are complaining about it in this way are the same people who love Joker. I'm just gonna guess. I'm gonna wild guess that they probably love Joker, and some part of them would be more satisfied if the game had originally Joker playable instead of Harley Quinn. I'm just gonna guess. I'm not trying to pigeonhole everyone. Now, and also it's not being received well again. So there's whole critical discourse as far as video game media writing is a thing. It's all like, oh god, this is terrible again, and I'm still the outlier because I think this game is great, and I mainly say that because it's great in a DC universe way. So great. Anyway, but a point of that which relates to everything is, I do get that because Batman the Animated Series was such a huge thing, and this was Kevin Conroy's sort of golden period, right?
Mm.
I do get that people are upset because it seemed like you killed Kevin Conroy in a unjustified or uncool way. The only point I want to make is can you have that upsetness and not blame it on Harley Quinn, the queer lady, or Deadshot's black now, big news, or all this stuff that gets wrapped up in, just hate. And I want to parse that because I want to understand it, basically. Like, is it really just like, is it the same thing as like when we're like, oh, you killed Han Solo, or like, oh, you crossed that line because Kevin Conroy is so important to me that, like that upsets me, like Phantom Menace upsets old Star Wars fans. I don't know. It's an open question. Because like you grew up with the Kevin Conroy Batman as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, but you and I talked about this before. Like, I was never a fan of casting Kevin Conroy as every version of Batman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like you're not killing the animated series Kevin Conroy Batman and Justice League, Kill the Justice League. You're killing the Arkham Bat, which again has its own fan base, and that was part of the outcry was it's very like kind of ignoble death that he gets,
Yeah.
in the scene. But again, my whole thing was like, you're going into this knowing it's called Kill the Justice League. Like, what did you expect? It's kind of the point of the game. But yeah, and to your point, like the timing can't be helped because Kevin Conroy passed like right before the game came out.
Yeah.
But I think to your point too, that was excuses for, because there are two kinds of criticism. Like, there are people who honestly didn't like the game mechanics or don't like this or that or the other thing. And then there was the other side of the internet that just, again, that have the outrageous YouTube thumbnails that why they don't like a certain thing. And it's got nothing to do with game mechanics or anything, right? It's got to do with, like, this is about, to your point, people of color and women.
Yeah, and it's totally out there. And I don't know what the numbers are. It could be 3 people just shouting a lot. I think
that's most of the time. Well, okay. You bring up Joker and Harley Quinn, which I think is a great segue too, because another big piece of news that we didn't get to talk about yet is, we had wondered why Joker 2, the sequel, had a $200 million budget. Like, the first movie was like $60 million, and all of a sudden they like tripled it for the sequel. And now I think the reason that it's such an expensive budget, it's got nothing to do with like special effects or anything like that. It's to clear the rights for all the songs, because it was confirmed that it's a jukebox musical. And there was speculation about whether or not Folie à Deux would be a musical. And now it's all but confirmed it's a jukebox musical. So now I'm kind of like, okay, you had mentioned when you do a musical, they're just by nature expensive. And I think I'm sure there'll be big sets and big set pieces, but I think a lot of that money is going into clearing the rights to whatever pop songs that they're going to be.
Yeah. Including. I personally love a jukebox musical. I just hope it's the jukebox, the things I would select. Yeah. I mean, what if Bobby Brown's On Our Own is in that? I mean, wouldn't you just create, you could die happy, right?
That would be the perfect movie for me. Exactly. Well, but to your point about like the types of fans who not just like Joker the character, but like that first Joker movie.
Yeah. Different.
Will be different from the ones who will like the sequel when it's a full-blown musical. So I'm excited because I love musicals, jukebox or not, and
Yeah.
with Joker and Harley Quinn at the center of one, you got
Yeah,
my.
no, I'm triply excited about it now, and I'm glad those rumors seem to be coalescing into it is a musical, and maybe it's just like because also I'm not sure I would trust them to make original songs. It depends who they would got. In fact, if it comes up next year, we're 12 Valentines is the team that does that kind of thing to make
Yeah,
associated original songs.
more corporate synergy there.
Yeah, but timing whatever, so I can root for jukebox songs of something that I like, and we can just guess. Do you feel okay with it being, because you were like sort of like it should be a musical, but did you envision what kind of musical it would be?
No, I mean, I had no idea. I mean, I knew that like you're going to cast Lady Gaga, she's probably going to sing in it, so that's
Yeah,
it makes sense. The fact that it's jukebox music, the James Gunn movies are essentially jukebox musicals too.
that's not, right, totally.
So like,
it
if you can do
synergy.
Right.
DC Synergy. DC's the musical one, guys. Now,
that's the big difference.
Yeah, right. Now, as of this year, right?
Before we wrap, I don't know if you had a chance to see this, like literally, I don't know, it could be an April Fool's joke. We always have to be careful what you see on the internet.
Absolutely.
Today. But I saw something, and then, again, when I saw it, I didn't realize what the date was. But there were pictures of Kristen Ritter on the Daredevil set. Now I'm saying that, I'm thinking, did I see what I saw, or was I tricked by April Fool's Day?
Well, they're totally going to bring Jessica Jones back in that show. They're totally going to do it because they should. It's in the universe. There's a fandom that has wanted to see Jessica Jones return for a while. It doesn't take a lot of explaining. She's not dead. She just hasn't been around. Why not in Daredevil bring back all the Defenders except for Iron Fist? Because the thing I saw,
Finn Jones,
the thing that I saw was obnoxious was people going, "Why not give Finn Jones another chance as Iron Fist?" And like,
he's apparently hinting at it. He's in interviews. Finn Jones has been saying maybe you'll see me in the MCU. So,
and who cares? You see, to me, as far again, reading the signs, reading terrain. If the people are like bring Finn Jones back are exactly, I mean that is just straight like we have no clue what's going on, let that white guy deserved another chance. I mean, come on,
as much as I hated the Iron Fist show, and that show was shit.
That show was terrible, and he was not good. Both of those.
Except, I will say, for the very end of the show, the very last scene of Iron Fist is Colleen Wing, as the power of the Iron Fist. She is Iron Fist in universe. So I'm all for bringing back Iron Fist as long as it's Jessica Henwick.
100%.
So,
and I am 90% sure that Finn Jones never needs to work in Marvel Universe again.
Or in Hollywood.
And I feel comfortable saying that on this podcast because that's how this whole shit got,
Yeah, that's right. That's how we got our start. It's
a long chapter with that. And again, that part wasn't hitting on Finn Jones at the time. That was just like, what if we got a different guy who is maybe Asian?
Yeah. And then they made Shang-Chi, which was basically what I said Iron Fist should be. So anyway, anything
I'd
else?
sooner have Shang-Chi be in the Daredevil show than fucking bring back the Finn Jones Iron Fist.
Well, we're going on what, like 4-5 years before we get another Shang-Chi movie anyway. So
right.
Who knows if we're getting Shang-Chi too at this point.
Right.
But anyway, anything else nerd popping your way?
Yeah,
just wrap up here.
12valentines.net. Find us on Bandcamp. We're gonna have a Birds of Prey song. We've got a Secret Six song. We're gonna have an X-Men song, and we also have some songs that are not as explicitly nerdy. So and I think that they're gonna turn out really cool, which is how I justify this self-promotion. And also, so 12valentines.net. And yourself?
I am on Twitter at the real Chow, _real_Chow. I keep saying I'm on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter.
All right. Also, wait, do you have two Keith Chows on Instagram? That shit is confusing me.
Yes, one is my public facing one. I'm real Keith Chow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
My other one is not so public. What's confusing is the real Chow is the one that's not public, but then the real Chow is my public handle on other things. So it doesn't make.
I didn't mean to out your Finsta versus.
No, it's fine. My Finsta is fine. The thing is, like, I'm not really good at social media anymore.
That's another thing that's changed in the past 7 years.
Yeah, I used to be real good at it, and now I'm not.
Yeah.
I
remember those days when we tweeted all day.
I don't know how to
shit now.
TikTok or do stories or whatever. So, but the Nerds of Color can be found on all those platforms because much better people are behind those accounts than I. So follow us on all platforms. Check out our videos on youtube.com/the Nerds of Color. Go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all the podcasts in the Hard Knock family. Go to 12valentines.net to get more info and back the 12 Valentines project. And we didn't talk sports. It was opening day over the weekend. The biggest story in sports, which maybe we'll talk about next time, is the face of baseball is an Asian guy with a gambling problem.
And I'm in Vegas, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll bet on him today because I can't live in Vegas. I'll bet on him to hit like 2 home runs and like steal 30 bases in one game or something.
Yeah. And use a Japanese handle like or a pseudonym. Yeah. So maybe we'll talk about Shohei Ohtani next week, perhaps.
Yeah, and whatever Final Four thing you're rooting for out there, and that's happening this week. I'll just say. It'll be resolved.
Also another Asian guy who was dominating sports.
So. Yeah, Purdue might go. I'm rooting for UConn, but it might resolve to like Purdue and UConn. I think in the final, or it could happen. Yeah.
Well, you know, we can talk more about this next week. Maybe Purdue wins and it'll be even more relevant, but. I have noticed a lot of Zach Edey hate on the internet.
Yeah.
And at the same time, and I'm going to call out our fellow Asian American basketball fans.
Yeah.
Not a lot of support from the Jeremy Lin folks.
Yeah.
Like, remember when we all went nuts over Linsanity? And not a peep from all of our Lin fans to like support another Asian guy who's actually dominating the sport. Like no shade to Jeremy Lin. But my man scored like 40 points and 20 rebounds in an Elite 8 game. And like not one Asian person is like celebrating. Except Bernard Chang. Shout out to Bernard Chang. He grew up a Boilers fan, so.
Okay. Go Zach Edey. I'm into it. I'm going to ask Shohei Ohtani to borrow some money
to bet on Zach Edey.
So I can go place a bet on Zach Edey.
That's the most Asian American sports fan you'll ever be.